Okay, welcome back to Conker Rants. Today I just wanted to talk about my top 5 favorite consoles. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with which one's better or whatever, it's just my personal favorites. And it might be a little bit of a shorter video, I guess, because I don't want to go into too much detail about it, considering that I do videos on consoles specifically that are longer. But, I guess we'll just start it off. So, number 5 on my list is the PC Engine. I love the PC Engine. Funny story is I didn't really know much about it for like a long while, and I was very into trying to collect for the TurboGrafx, and then when I did eventually get a TurboGrafx, I realized how expensive the games were, and it was kind of disappointing because, you know, I really want to play a lot of those games. And then I found out that like a lot of consoles in Europe and in Japan, the console was like different, and so obviously a lot of games are very much cheaper for PC Engine to get the PC Engine version of the game versus, say, you know, the TurboGrafx. So eventually I did get a PC Engine and I started collecting for that more, and this one is a Core Graphics, which is a nice one, and I have a little add-on for it and stuff so that it plays in a higher quality. I actually love this console. It's such a good console. It has so many good games. It's kind of like an in-between 8-bit and 16-bit. Like, the games look 16-bit, but they don't really have parallax scrolling for the most part. Some of them do. It happens, but it's not very often. But there are a lot of very good games for this that eventually a lot of them did come out on Genesis as well. And just to show it off, I guess, the first thing I'll show is the controller. The controller looks like this. It's kind of like a mix. If you've seen TurboGrafx controllers, it's the exact same thing, basically, just it looks slightly different design-wise. But it still has the two little turbo buttons above your A and B over here. And it's a really nice controller. If you like an NES controller, you'll like this because it's just like a more curved version of that. And all the games, like TurboGrafx, come on Hue cards, as they're called for this, but I guess they were called turbo chips, right, for TurboGrafx. Had to be cool. And this is Bomberman 94 here. But yeah, they're really good. Like, I highly recommend collecting for this console because it's not overly expensive. Some games can be, but you can get a lot of good games for a decent price. And also the consoles aren't that much to buy anyways. There is a CD add-on you can get into if you're really interested in that. Okay, so for my number 4 console is the NES. The first console I ever owned as a kid. And I grew up with this, and a lot of my generation obviously grew up with this console, and obviously the NES Mini is out now, and people have experienced this console to death over the years, so it needs no introduction. Obviously, I've already done a video about it as well. I mean, obviously the controller, again, is iconic, kind of similar to the PC Engine one, but like more archaic, I guess, in that degree, but, you know, it worked for the time, and having a D-pad instead of a joystick was a pretty crazy thing at the time, believe it or not. Obviously the NES has a legendary library of games with, like, you know, countless, like Mario Brothers started on it, Metroid started on it, Zelda, the list goes on, and obviously I recommend collecting NES at any point in time, or if you have any other way to play it, like on Switch, then definitely play some of those games. They're all worth your time. Even the bad games on it are fun to experience at least once. So yeah, that's my number 4. Okay, so my number 3 console is one that I have to do a longer video about, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it is the Sega Dreamcast. This is a Sega Sports Edition. The Dreamcast, I feel like, to some people doesn't need any introduction, but to other people, it is so understated how amazing this console is and how much this console means to me as a gamer, and like how many amazing games came out for it in its reasonably short life. You know, like Crazy Taxi, we had all these arcade games get ported to it in like almost near perfect ports. So like Crazy Taxi, we had what else? Soul Calibur, Shenmue is a really good game on it if you're really into, like, I guess kind of like an action RPG to a certain degree. Sonic Adventure games were both on it, obviously. I mean, Dreamcast, you can go out and look at the library. It has an amazing library of games for such a short lifespan. And a lot of those games ended up getting ported and getting sequels on PS2, GameCube, and Xbox later on. and it's an amazing console. It's such a good console. All the games are on GD ROMs, which are kind of like a weird proprietary format that they created, I guess. It's kind of like in between. Like, it's better than a CD, not quite as good as a DVD. And obviously the controllers and memory cards, I think, are really where they really got really experimental, and I'm surprised that they never, or any other company for that matter, never dove into things that they were diving into at the time. So, yeah. So this is a Dreamcast controller. It is one of my favorite controllers, despite it having a few flaws. Like, the D-pad is pretty bad, which is crazy considering Sega's last two consoles, the Genesis and Saturn, had an amazing D-pad. But I mean, there's a screen on the controller, which, like, in certain games, like on my stream right now, I've been playing through Resident Evil Code Veronica, shows your health, your heart rate, like in Resident Evil games, on the screen, which is pretty cool while you're playing. And on that note, the screen is actually a memory card. Your memory cards go on the top of the controller there. And some games had mini games, like Sonic Adventure is the best example probably, where you could have chows, kind of like a Tamagotchi, and you could take them with you, and you could train them and play with them when, like, you went to school or something, and then when you come home you put it back in the game by just inserting a memory card. So yeah, really, really ahead of its time, and I can't understate how much I love the Dreamcast. It's literally one of my favorites. It is my top three. It's number 3, and now we'll move on to number 2. Okay, so my number 2 console is one of the main consoles, and probably one of the first consoles I think I ever went by myself to a store on a launch day to actually pre-order and buy. And, or not really by myself, I guess. I was with friends. But, you know, it was one of those consoles. I was so excited for this when it was announced. And I just adore it. To this day, one of the biggest game libraries. Definitely one of the best consoles of all time. Probably is the best console of all time. The PlayStation 2. Oh my god, this console, absolutely, when it came out, changed my life and my entire outlook on gaming altogether. Like, this console is, hands down, has one of the best libraries in video game history ever, and one of the biggest, probably, I'm pretty sure. If not the biggest. I think the Wii might be the only one to be close, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I got this on launch day, and I love this console. I had a fat version like this, obviously. I love the design. I think even nowadays, I think this is still like a very sleek, amazing looking console. And I wish PlayStation would go back to something a little bit more beautiful, because I'm not a big PlayStation 5 design enthusiast. I also love, obviously, that, you know, the stand. Nowadays, I mostly play on my Slim, because it has built-in online and stuff like that, which is also a great console. Extremely reliable. I mean, both of them, I've never had any bad experiences with PlayStation 2s dying or anything like that, but that's just me. I know some people have, obviously, over the years. It's not perfect. So many good games, you know, like, I can't even list all the games. There's so many good ones. It has my favorite game of all time, Metal Gear Solid 3, and Metal Gear Solid 2 for that matter. And yeah, if you grew up with a PlayStation 2, you know. If you didn't and you'd like to check out a PS2, like, go get one and play it. It's really a shame that Sony doesn't take more care of titles that came out on PS2 and remastering and stuff. I know they re-released some stuff on, like, PlayStation 5, PS4, but they're not remastered. They're just kind of the same game, and it's unfortunate. It'd be really cool to have backwards compatibility with discs, but that'll probably never happen. But yeah, PlayStation 2, my second favorite console of all time, like, hands down. There's no competition. Okay, so my number 1 favorite console of all time, this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who knows me or watches my streams or watches some of my videos, at least, by how much I play games on this. And I did kind of cheat with this because I included the add-ons in this listing. I know technically they're separate consoles, but I just, for one, I didn't want to take it apart, and for two, it's hard for me to make a list and then say have all 3 of these things on my list. So I was like, I'll just put them all at number 1. It's my list. I'll do what I want. Sue me. The Sega Genesis 32X Sega CD. So yeah, Sega Genesis, if you don't know, was a 16-bit console that was a competitor for the NES and eventually the Super Nintendo, and went on to be one of the greatest consoles of all time. Like, a lot of people would stand by that 100%. Obviously, we have a Genesis Mini as well now, so if you want to play it, that's a good way to do it. And there's also kinds of collections. Sega's done a lot better at keeping their games modern than Nintendo has. But yeah, so yeah, if you don't know, the 32X was a 32-bit add-on for the Genesis that did not sell well, had not very many games at all. But a lot of the games it does have, despite what everyone will tell you, are good games. There's a lot of good games for it, you know, like Metalhead and Shadow Squadron, Tempo. I'm just looking on my shelf. Mortal Kombat 2, Doom, Virtua Fighter. There's a lot of good games for it. The Sega Genesis obviously needs no introduction. I mean, Sonic the Hedgehog started on it, so there's that, right? And all kinds of other series, Streets of Rage, you know. Sega CD is another one that I'm a very fierce defender of, because a lot of people will immediately write it off as like a full motion video game console, and a lot of the games on it are full motion video. There are a good few, but that's not a majority of the console, and it doesn't represent the countless good games that are on Sega CD, like Snatcher, Vey. The Lunar series is great on it. Obviously, they've come out and they're being remastered now, even. What else? There's so many good games for it. Like, I can't even think of them. Pop Full Mail. Rise of the Dragon's a good one. But yeah, like, it's a console for me. I grew up with Sega Genesis as not my first console, but my first console that I really, really wanted. And when I did eventually get it, I was obsessed with my Sega Genesis, and I didn't have a 32X back in the day when I was a kid, or a Sega CD. So when I got old enough to go to flea markets and buy things for myself, I eventually did, and I paid like nothing for these when I bought them, and they're worth a lot more now. But this is by far my most played console, like, in general. I still play a lot of Sega CD games to this day. I still play a lot of 32X. I mean, my goal as a collector is to get a complete 32X collection, which is a big ask considering some of the games are over $1,000. So if I'm ever rich, it'll happen. Or I have a midlife crisis, one or the other. And yeah, so that's my top 5 consoles of all time. I hope you liked the video. If you do like the video, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. I'm trying to do videos here and also do Twitch at the same time. It's a lot of work, so I appreciate any comments or anything that you guys do. Like, I really do appreciate it. And yeah, so the list is PC Engine, NES, Dreamcast, PS2, and Sega Genesis 32X CD. Thanks for watching the video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye!